Central administration through fleet services. Central administration and compliance. This policy will be administered centrally through the Fleet Services Department. The Fleet Services Department and any business unit which operates interstate or intrastate CMVs jointly owns responsibility to ensure compliance with this policy so that Aramark's twin aims of promoting the safe, proper, and professional operation of all CMVs which Aramark owns, leases, or otherwise operates, and employing only the most qualified drivers of CMVs are achieved. The Fleet Services Department, as subject matter expert, will, however, have the final determination on compliance and on the corrective action that needs to be taken to achieve compliance and to meet Aramark's twin aims. Purchases of CMVs through Fleet Services Department. All CMVs will be purchased through the Fleet Services Department, and no Aramark employee or business unit is authorized to purchase any CMV except through the Fleet Services Department. The requirement in this paragraph includes any vehicle which is not a CMV as defined in this policy, but which is, if combined with another vehicle, could fall within that definition. For example, if a BU wishes to purchase a vehicle equipped with its own power unit, for example, a large pickup truck such as a Ford F-250, or if a BU wishes to purchase a vehicle without a power unit, for example, a trailer, both items must be purchased through the Fleet Services Department. This is because either vehicle, for example, the Ford F-250 or the trailer, could be combined with another vehicle, and the gross vehicle weight of the combination could exceed 10,001 pounds. Purchases of CMV maintenance services through Fleet Services Department. All CMV maintenance services provided by others will be purchased through the Fleet Services Department, and no Aramark employee or BU is authorized to purchase maintenance systems for any CMV except through the Fleet Services Department. The only approved method for service is through the current vendor approved by Fleet Services. Any exception to this rule must be approved with the Fleet Services Department prior to implementation. Regulatory filings. The Fleet Services Department will be responsible to monitor regulatory developments at the DOT and make any and all filings with the DOT and any state departments of transportation. No Aramark employee, operating location, or BU may make any filing with the DOT or any state department of transportation except through the Fleet Services Department. The BUs with the CMVs will be responsible to ensure that no BU personnel makes DOT filings except through the Fleet Services Department. Next slide. Policy, regulatory updates, and website. The Fleet Services Department will maintain a website containing information on this policy and other applicable Aramark policies such as the Aramark CMV Controlled Substances and Alcohol Testing Policy, DOT regulatory updates and associated changes to this policy and other applicable Aramark policies, and information associated with operation of Aramark vehicles. The Fleet Services Department will develop and distribute to all BUs and the operating locations housing CMVs any updates to this policy and other applicable Aramark policies that may be required based on DOT regulatory action and guidance on compliance. The BUs with CMVs will be responsible to ensure that authorized drivers, managers, and other appropriate personnel review and adopt any policy updates and any compliance guidance. Driver qualification files. Aramark is required to maintain a driver qualification file for each authorized driver of a CMV in interstate commerce it employs. It is the responsibility of each such individual authorized driver and the location manager to ensure that all DQF required documents are completed, placed in the DQF, and sent to J.J. Keller for central filing and auditing. Applicants for an Aramark CMV driving position are not allowed to drive an Aramark CMV until J.J. Keller has verified the applicant has a fully completed driver qualification file. DQFs include at minimum the following documents: application for employment, request for check of driving record, request for information from previous employers, medical examination report, medical examination certificate, record and certificate of road test, record of violations annual review certificate, certification of road test, copy of driver's license, certification of compliance with driver's license requirements, driver certification for other compensated work. Next slide. Motor vehicle record. See Exhibit A for checklist for all documents required in the driver qualification files of CDL and non-CDL drivers. At least annually, the location manager will review the driver qualification files for each authorized driver of a CMV reporting directly or indirectly into the location manager to ensure the DQF is up to date. In addition, the DQF will be subject to audit by the Fleet Services designee, J.J. Keller. Each authorized driver of a CMV is responsible to provide any and all updates of information contained in the DQF, and as the authorized driver becomes aware of any change in the information contained in the DQF, any failure to comply with this paragraph may be the basis for disciplinary action, including but not limited to termination of employment. Access to the driver qualification files includes an employee's private medical information and will be limited in accordance with the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996 as amended, HIPAA. For the avoidance of doubt, access to driver employee medical records in Aramark field operations will be limited to the driver, employee's immediate manager, and Aramark Human Resources, and all such records will be kept in separate and secured files. Qualification and hiring procedures. Aramark's driver hiring qualification standards and procedures have been developed to achieve two goals. The first goal is to meet or exceed all FMCSR and or applicable state law regulations concerning CMV driver qualification. The second goal is to select and to continue to employ only those authorized drivers who share Aramark's values and goals of operating a CMV in a safe, legal, and professional manner. Hiring standards. Aramark requires all authorized drivers of all CMVs to be a minimum of 21 years of age and have a minimum of 3 years verifiable driving experience. For non-CDL drivers, this experience can be in a non-CMV vehicle. However, each BU has the discretion of requiring CMV driving experience. In the case of drivers hired to drive CDL-regulated vehicles, these drivers will be required to show 3 years of CDL driving experience prior to being hired into a CDL driving position. Any exceptions to this rule must specifically be approved by the Fleet Services Department, as USDOT has specific training requirements that must be met for entry-level drivers. Next slide. Driver applicants will also be required, based upon experience, training, or both, to be able to safely operate a CMV, read and speak the English language sufficiently to converse with the general public to understand highway traffic signs and signals in the English language, to respond to official inquiries, and to make entries on reports and records. Determine and execute proper cargo securement procedures. Driver ineligibility. Either of the two following circumstances will render a current or potential employee ineligible to operate an Aramark CMV. If within any rolling 3-year period, the current or potential employee has received a conviction for any serious driving infraction as defined in this procedure, or the current or potential employee has a score of 8 or greater on the Motor Vehicle Records Check Code, where the code has a point system, Where the code does not have a point system, Aramark may, in its discretion, make a determination as to the points applicable to any infractions using the ACD list of infractions and points found on the Fleet Services Department website. Aramark shall not consider for employment a driver applicant who has been convicted of any offense involving the operation of a motor vehicle while impaired by alcohol or driving under the influence within the past 3 years. Aramark shall not consider for employment a driver applicant who has been convicted of a major moving violation as defined by the FMCSR within the past 3 years. A major moving violation includes those violations in which there was a willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. Such violations are considered to be unsafe and unacceptable. Aramark shall not consider any driver applicant who has been convicted of a criminal offense involving a commercial vehicle, including operating while under the influence of a controlled substance, transporting a controlled substance, or a felony involving the use of a CMV. Aramark retains discretion to reject applicants for other reasons. Application for employment. All driver applicants shall complete an Aramark application for employment with the application and addendum forms containing all of the information required by the FMCSR. A copy of this application and addendum may be obtained from the Fleet Services Department website. Aramark's hiring standards require that CDL driver applicants list all former employees for the past 10 years whose job responsibilities required operating a motor vehicle. Driver applicants are also required to comply with the next slide. Requirements listed in Aramark's pre-employment screening and background check policy. License. Driver applicants must provide Aramark with a legible copy of their driver's license prior to their start date. License checks on all Aramark CMV drivers will be conducted by J.J. Keller. J.J. Keller will review the driving record of the applicant and apply the Aramark criteria to ensure compliance with Aramark policy. J.J. Keller will notify the hiring manager or the appropriate human resources professional and the Fleet Services Department if the license does not meet the Aramark and DOT criteria. Additionally, each applicant will be checked to verify they only possess one driver's license. Fair Credit Reporting Act disclosure. Driver applicants will be asked for their written authorization giving Aramark permission to obtain a copy of their driver's records. If a driver applicant is not hired based on the information provided in a driving record, then the driver applicant will receive a copy of the record and the summary of consumer rights pursuant to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Motor Vehicle Record. Aramark shall request an MVR for driver applicants being considered for employment after it has received a completed and signed employment application. An MVR shall be requested from every state in which the applicant has held a motor vehicle license during the past 3 years. If an MVR request from a former state or licensure comes back indicating no record found, the MVR request will be placed in the DQF if the applicant is hired as verification that Aramark attempted to obtain the information. Aramark will review all MVR information to determine if the driver applicant meets the hiring standards regarding driving records and will compare the MVR against the employment application to check for completeness and accuracy. Persons who fail to provide on their application all relevant information regarding their motor vehicle driving history may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. Additionally, Aramark managers are required to check all CMV drivers' MVRs annually. These checks and J.J. Keller will verify if the MVR meets the Aramark criteria. If the MVR does not meet the Aramark criteria, the driver's manager and the Fleet Services Department will be notified. It will be the Aramark manager or supervisor's responsibility to remove all drivers that do not meet the Aramark driving criteria.